Hey everybody, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Derling, and you may notice that this is a different filming location than I normally do. This is actually in our dining room. This just happened to be where I'm set up today. So I thought I would go back in time and do my personal list of the top 20 albums from 30 years ago, 1995. 1995, very transitional period in music. You know, grunge and alternative were all over the charts, as was country, like new country and hip hop and R&B. So, you know, traditional rock was really taking a pounding. There were a few bands that were continuing to sell, but for the most part, a lot of bands were knocked down to smaller labels, or they were at the end of their major label contracts. But that doesn't mean there wasn't a lot of good music put out in that melodic rock vein. So thought I would go through 20 albums from 30 years ago, 1995. 1995 being 30 years ago just doesn't seem right. I keep adding it up in my head and it keeps working. So I'm actually going to start off with an album that I would almost classify as a disappointment, but I'm putting it here for a reason, because I know this is an album that a lot of fans of this band really like, and I do like some songs on it. So I'm going to start off with Bon Jovi and These Days. This was the first album, as you can see, where they're billed as a four-piece. Alec John Such was no longer in the band. And so this came out in springtime, 1995, and this kind of picks up where the Keep the Faith album left off. And I like the Keep the Faith album a lot. But what I find about this album is that this is where the ballads and the mid-tempo and the slower, I'm going to say sappy type songs start to eat the band whole. This is really where I see that decline happening. But there are a lot of Bon Jovi fans, I know this because I've talked to a ton of people, that say this is the last good Bon Jovi album. And it's after that that it started to get really choppy. For me, it's the one before. But as you know, I'm looking for submissions for Bon Jovi fan videos, anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute and a half. So if you really like this album, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I need to revisit this. I mean, the opening track, Hey God, is a really good, heavy one. Something for the Pain isn't bad. The big hit off of this one was This Ain't a Love Song, which was another ballad. It was like so many ballads in a row. I was on board in terms of the fact that one of my bands were still having hits, but yeah, had a hard time with this one. This one never really took hold, but like I said, tell me why I'm wrong. If you really like this album, I know it's got some fans out there. So that's my number 20. It's my bottom of this particular list. Next one is another album that I was kind of disappointed in for totally other reasons. It certainly wasn't because they went soft. I've talked about this a lot, most notably a few weeks ago in our Bob Rock video that Matt and I did. Skidro, Subhuman Race. I was excited about this album. It seemed to take forever. It had been 4 years since Slave to the Grind, 3 years since the Covers EP, and there was all kinds of rumors that the band wasn't getting along. Of course they weren't. This is the last album with Sebastian Bach, and I've still never quite embraced this album. I know a lot of people like it. Some people think it's their best. Now there are songs on here that I really like. I like My Enemy. I really like Into Another. You'd think I'd hate that song because it's kind of alt rock sounding for them, but I do like it. Yeah, a lot of this album, when I look at the song titles, it just seems like they were struggling. Like Face Against My Soul is just an awkward sounding title and a song to me. But again, there are some key moments on here I do like. It's Skidrow, you know, I mean, I love the band, but yeah, again, if I'm wrong about this, tell me why I'm wrong about this. Are there any key tracks I need to go back and listen to for particular things? I'm going to tell you right now, I can't stand the song Eileen, and I've never been the biggest fan of Breaking Down. That song just puts me in a sad, depressed mood. Anyway, Skidrow, Subhuman Race, my number 19. Number 18 is a little obscure. Second of two albums that this group put out, which was an offshoot of Journey, who were in the process of getting back together, but were still dormant at this time. This is The Storm, and their second album, Eye of the Storm. Now, their first album came out in 91 on Interscope Records. So they had a major label deal. They had a top 30 single, I've Got a Lot to Learn About Love. This was, of course, Greg Raleigh, keyboard and vocalist, original keyboard vocalist for Journey. Kevin Chalfant on lead vocals. Guy sounded a lot like Steve Perry. Ross Valerie and Steve Smith were on the first, the Storm album. I know Steve Smith's not on this, it's Ron Wixow. I can't remember if Ross Valerie's on this one or not. This one was really hard to find. Let's see now. Yeah, it actually doesn't list the band members on here, but so it's not quite as Journey-esque in terms of personnel, but the first track, Don't Give Up, is just good melodic rock. The ballad, Having to Hold, is really good. You know, both of the Storm albums I think are choppy. They've got great songs on them, but there was a songwriting thing that just wasn't quite happening, but still decent and still melodic rock coming out at a time when there wasn't much. This copy I have here is on Music for Nations Records, mini major label. Got Metallica started in the UK. Number 17 is a band I wasn't into back in '95. I got into them a few years later, even though they'd been around forever. AC/DC and Ballbreaker. As the years have gone by, I've come to realize that this is actually a pretty good album. I know one member of the TVC crew, namely Will, thinks this is the best AC/DC album. Love Hail Caesar. I think that's really good. Hard as Rock was the first single off this one and probably the best known song. Whiskey on the Rocks, the title song, you know, it's pretty good. And another thing that's cool about this album is that they had I should see if I can find out his name, but the artwork in it is all like Marvel Comics. They actually had a Marvel Comics writer do this. Comic art provided by Marvel, David McCacken, Phil Hefferman, but yeah, so it's pretty cool for that reason. But yeah, it's a pretty decent album. Even though, you know, here we are 30 years ago. Oh, they're so old. They're still out there on tour now, which is awesome. Next one is one of my favorite sort of unsung artists, and this is an album that kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't know it existed for 2 years later, but Aldo Nova. This is called Nova's Dream. Now, he recently reissued this with a different cover. This is like half instrumental and half vocal tracks. It's a very experimental album. He did this all on his own, and it's really, really cool as far as, you know, he can play a multitude of instruments. It's not an album per se, you know, it's not a proper follow-up to, say, Blood on the Bricks, but there's so few Aldo Nova albums. I like to embrace what's there. Now, this took me a while to get into, but he actually says in the liner notes that each of these songs was dedicated to, you know, a musical influence on here. For example, there's a song Dream Walk that he said it's a beautiful instrumental, but he said it was inspired by David Gilmour. You know, there's a song, and usually the song titles will give you a clue as to who's who's being referenced. For example, there's a thing called Are You Inexperienced? Well, that's obviously a Jimi Hendrix reference. There's one called Carlito's Way, which is a reference to Carlos Santana. Apparently Aldo's putting a new album out this year, and I will be reviewing it. I will be getting it. I'm so excited about that. But yeah, Nova's Dream by Aldo Nova. It's even kind of ambiguous as to who the artist is, but I consider it an Aldo Nova album. So my number 15 is an album that I just talked about not too long ago on an album and review, just so happens. Foreigner, Mr. Moonlight. Now, this album came out in late '94 in some territories, but Canada put it out in early '95, and it was on Attic Records here. And this actually gave them a substantial radio hit with a great ballad called Until the End of Time. It was a top 20 single in Canada, almost reached the top 40 in the States, which, again, you have to look at it in context. It was just about impossible for a veteran band like this to get on the radio, and they managed to. The first track, Under the Gun, got a little bit of radio play too. This has got some really good songs on it. White Lie, Hole in My Soul, I Keep Hoping, Hand on My Heart, Running the Risk. It's the last full album they did with Lou Gramm. I think it's a good sounding album. This might actually be the last album I have that was produced by the late Mike Stone. But yeah, Mr. Moonlight by Foreigner. Now, next up is an album that, of course, I wasn't familiar with at the time, and I understand that this isn't one of his better received albums, and I'm not really sure why. Maybe it's a little bit different, but it's self-titled, though it's not his first, of course, Joe Satriani. It's produced by Glyn Johns, and it's got, Cool Number 9, Luminous Flesh Giants, Killer Bebop is kind of cool. Had a radio hit called You're My World. I don't think there's anything wrong with this album at all. At number 13, another album that I really liked some of the songs on it from the get-go, but kind of like the Skidro, it was just angry and mean and nasty, although not quite so much as the Skidro album, Fourth Extreme album, Waiting for the Punchline. I mean, Hip Today, I loved that from the get-go musically, and I loved what the lyrics were talking about, especially at that time. That really spoke to someone that, you know, people that were following trends. It was a real, you know, think about what you're doing. No Respect, I like. It's nasty, but you know, Gary Sharon shreds his voice on that one. There's some really good ballads on here, like Unconditionally. Shadowboxing's another sort of good mid-tempo one. Yeah, but then there's songs like Naked and Tell Me Something I Don't Know that just seemed like he's screaming. And Gary's too good a vocalist to resort to screaming too much. But so, like I said, it's got its moments, but it's down here at number 13. The next one is an album that totally passed me by. Even though I liked the band, I could never find it anywhere, and I kind of forgot that it existed. The reason I ended up buying it is because my friend Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation and Steve Deluxe from Rock and Metal Invasion, I had the two of them sit in with an episode when we were talking about our top 10 Rainbow songs. Also, I was asked to participate in Martin Popoff's Rainbow panel book, Run with the Wolf. Great book. I did a few chapters in that book, and I thought, well, I better get all the albums so I know what I'm talking about. So I sent away for this sort of you know, lost period album, 12 years after the last Rainbow album been out of shape, and billed under Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, called Stranger in Us All. And this is a copy on RCA, so they were still on a major label in some parts of the world. This had Doogie White on vocals, you know, different Rainbow lineup. I actually don't think there's anything wrong with this album. I think it's quite enjoyable. Wolf to the Moon's really good. Stand and Fight, I really like. Too Late for Tears, yeah. Black Masquerade, this is good. It's an oddball in terms of where it sits in the Rainbow catalog when it came out. Of course, it didn't really do much, and this was the last, you know, full Rainbow studio album for Ritchie Blackmore, but I think it's good. Number 11, a band I love, not one of my favorite albums, but that's more of a musical, like there's nothing wrong with the songs on this album. It's Toto and Tamboo. This is the first album they did after Jeff Porcaro died, and his replacement was Simon Phillips, who was, you know, an amazing drummer. Of course, they would never have anything less than an amazing drummer. This came out in 95 in a lot of parts of the world. Didn't come out in North America until 96, but it's a 95 album. But this album also has, like Kingdom of Desire, which I love. One of my favorite Toto albums was a pretty hard rocking album. Steve Lukather sang all the songs on that. He sings a lot of the songs on here, but they've got some background vocalists, guest background vocalists, and it tends to lean into a little bit too much of their R&B side for my liking, but I'll tell you what I do like on this album. Gift of Faith is a good opener. I Will Remember is just an awesome, really emotional ballad. Kind of got a weird video to it, but if that's the easiest way to go listen to it, I would recommend it. Slipped Away is good. I think my favorite song on this album is Drag Him to the Roof. And there's chops galore here. It's good, it's just not my favorite from Toto. So that's my number 11. My number 10 is going to surprise a lot of people. It's not a band I talk about. It's not a band anybody talks about. I talked about this with Crash on Crash Course Metal Show. I talked to Trevor about this band, Tattoo Rodeo. Now this is an album they put out independently in I think early 95, maybe late 94 is when I first read about it. It's called Skin. Now they only did one album previous to that. It was a major label album, Rode Hard Put Away Wet, which is on Atlantic Records. I think this is the better album. It's nice and raw, produced by Arthur Payson, and it's just good, really bluesy hard rock. 2 Days Gone is really good. Can't Keep My Woman Down. It's got an awesome riff. It's got some nice ballads on it, like Waiting for You, Chamber of Mary's Gun. Good stuff. I don't know how easy this is to find. It's on Mausoleum Records, and in Canada it got EMI distribution, so this was a little bit easier to find maybe here. Number 9 is an album that I don't listen to it a lot, but for what it represents, I have a real soft spot for it. It's Queen, Made in Heaven, the posthumous album they did 4 years after Freddie Mercury passed away. A lot of the songs on here are reworked solo songs from either Freddie or Brian, or Roger Taylor's band The Cross with new instrumentation put on them, some of the very, very last vocals recorded by Freddie Mercury. It's got that poignant cover of the statue of Freddie from Montreux and then the three surviving guys on the back. One of the reasons I have a soft spot for this is one of the first CDs I bought after I got my first car, and I had to get a CD player installed in it because it came with a cassette deck, and this is one of the very first CDs I bought. I bought this one in Def Leppard's Vault, which is a best of, so it doesn't qualify, although I did listen to it a lot. But the title song, Made in Heaven, is really, really good. I like how they do it on here. Too Much Love Will Kill You. Of course, Brian did that solo piano with the Freddie Mercury tribute. It was also on his Back to the Light album, and I like the Queen version here. They actually had a couple of European hits here, Heaven for Everyone, which was a Cross song, and also You Don't Fool Me. So there's enough here, worth listening to. Now, I never understood the point of the 20 minutes of wasted space at the end of this. I know it's supposed to represent heaven or whatever, but to me, I would have rather heard 3 or 4, put some live songs on here or something, and as we know, there would be more Queen, unreleased Queen stuff to follow. But anyway, Queen Made in Heaven, my number 9. Number 8's a band that's on the verge of putting out a new album, and I'm here for it. But this is the third Haram Scaram album, Voice of Reason. This came out still on Warner Music in Canada at this point. The first single was a great sort of mid-tempo ballad called Blue. Got some Queen touches. They started using a little Queen touch to their music because they weren't using that before. They were very much sort of like, I'm going to say Def Leppard, Hagar era, Van Halen, a little extreme, a little Steve Vai, but there's some Queen stuff on here, which is really cool. Pate Thins is a really good heavy rocker. I've always loved that. But yeah, another good Haram Scaram album. These guys, pretty consistent throughout their career. Now the next one, I've got 2 coming up that are generally thought of as EPs, but they're pretty full length. I mean, in the 70s, they'd have been considered albums, and I've really liked this collection of songs. Steve Vai, Alien Love Secrets, he recorded this while he was in the midst of doing like a big, grandiose, what would become the Fire Garden album. But he put this out in the meantime, and this has got 7 songs, and each one of them are fantastic. The best known one, of course, is Bad Horsey, which has got the sound effects that he does, and it's just a killer song. Tender Surrender's a ballad. He always would do that live. I'm trying to think when we saw him what he did from this. I think he did Bad Horsey. My memory's so bad. But I really, really like this one. It's got a cute little number on here called Yayo Gak, which is one of his sons. He recorded them, they're, making little kid noises and made a song about it. And a pretty cool one. So that's my number 7, Steve Vai. At number 6 is an album that, certain members of the band don't even want to talk about. Night Ranger, Feeding Off the Mojo. Now this is the Gary Moon, Brad Gillis, Kelly Keagy lineup of Night Ranger. So Gary Moon on bass and vocals. Gary sounds nothing at all like Jack Blades at this time. Jack Blades, he had been in Damn Yankees, but this same year he and Tommy Shaw put out their first acoustic-based album, which I had, but I was never the biggest fan of it. I liked a couple of songs on it. But this, I read about this in Mental Edge, and I couldn't believe there was a new Night Ranger album. Now, I compare this album a lot to the 94 Motley Crue album with John Corabi on vocals, because the songs that Gary Moon sings don't sound at all like Night Ranger. They're just good songs, I think. Now when Kelly Keagy takes a vocal, it sounds like Night Ranger. Great guitar playing from Brad. I mean, this was on a small label. It didn't go anywhere, but I think this is a worthy album and should be looked at more discerningly, I think. Now we're into the top 5, and another album that's generally considered an EP, although it's pretty long for an EP, but I'll explain why. Dream Theater, A Change of Seasons. Now this isn't really considered one of their albums, because it's kind of their 4th album. They usually don't count it. They usually call Falling into Infinity their 4th album. Here's why they call it an EP. The opening track, A Change of Seasons, is like 23, 24 minutes long. That's the only new material on here. So that's why they classify this as an EP. But this is a full-length release because it's got a lot of really, really excellent live covers. They do Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding by Elton John. Awesome. Perfect Strangers, Deep Purple. Really, really good. They do an awesome Led Zeppelin medley, and then the big medley at the end, which is 6 songs that sound nothing like each other, seamlessly put together. And I like this whole thing. The Change of Seasons is an amazing song. I think it was, Portnoy wrote it about his mother dying. She died very young, I think 1984. So, excellent, excellent. I had to put this pretty high because I listened to it a lot. Number 4 is a band that, or this album, I've been on the Contrarians. I called it my favorite, which is very contrarian. Dokken, their reunion album, Dysfunctional. This came out in some territories in '94 when it was self-titled, with missing a couple of songs, but it came out in most of the world in '95. I was excited about this. It was hyped up in Metal Edge. This album did okay. It got to 47 on Billboard, which wasn't bad, and it probably sold 250,000 copies. And this was their last major label album. It was on Columbia. Too High to Fly was a big radio hit, rock radio hit. Now this had a little bit of alternative, a little bit of down tuning, and just enough so that it didn't sound dated, I don't think. And I think Dawn sounds really good on this album still. Another song that got a little bit of airplay is their cover of ELP's From the Beginning. But yeah, this is a really, really good album. And never, I don't think, as a band album, been more appropriately named Dysfunctional, because that's what that band was all about. Top 3 are all heavy hitters. In a lot of ways, these ones could all be interchangeable. This is my feeling on how they rank today. Number 3, a band that I had just gotten into when they put what was to be, we thought, their final album in 1990. You all know where I'm going with this. So I was completely ecstatic when I found out that Y&T had reunited. Now, it took me about a year before I could find this, so I didn't hear this until '96, but Musically Incorrect came out in 1995. And this is a really raw, independently produced album, but it sounds good. Instruments are nice and clear, and it's got some great songs on it. Now, some people think this was a little bit too alternative. I don't really hear it, except maybe the song Quicksand, but I mean, you all know what I think of Y&T. I wrote a book about them. They're one of my favorite bands ever. I think this is a really, really strong album. Not sure about the cover art, but yeah, good album, and was most welcome to find out that they were back. Number 2, a band that, even though grunge had taken over, still managed to have a #1 album. Van Halen and Balance. I got to cover that front cover, because that, the police will, the Taste Police will take it down. It's a weird cover anyway. This was the 4th and final full-length album with Sammy, of course. Don't Tell Me What Love Can Do. Oh, it's still one of my favorite Van Halen songs ever. I listened to this album a ton. It's the one time I got to see them was on this tour, and it was supposed to be with Skidro, but I've told that story before. We won't get into that. It's my number 2. I don't think it's not my favorite, but it's pretty close. And my number 1, another band I wrote a book about. Love this album. Kansas, Freaks of Nature. Out of nowhere, they come back with this independent album. It was their first new album in 7 years. Really, really strong lineup and a great collection of songs. And it's a shame that this album didn't get major label distribution. It's too bad that, they couldn't have gotten Sony to put this out, so it just had that wider recognition. Although I think it is re-released now and available. But this is a heavier album for them. It's got touches like it. Let's put it this way. If you were a fan of Dream Theater, or maybe what Fate's Warning were doing around that time, I think you'd be surprised at how well this album sits next to those. It's got some heavy passages, but it's got, David Ragsdale on violin. Steve Walsh sounds, a little ragged, but still pretty good on the vocals. And just really heavy guitar from Richard Williams and Ragsdale. Great bass playing from Billy Kurtz. Phil Ehart on drums, it's some of his best drumming. But every song on this is just amazing. Amazing. So there you go. Those are my top 20 albums from 1995. What are some of your favorite albums from that year? List them below in the comments. I try to read every comment that comes in, whatever platform you're commenting on. And don't forget, my books are available. I'll have the link to those below. Got some cool things coming up. And I just want to keep thanking you for your continued support. Continue to watch. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll talk to you later. This has been Tim's Vinyl Confessions.